Welcome back to Never Iron Anything Comics Review Podcast. It's episode 176. This time we're investigating a single UK-based cartoonist, one who should be better known, and in my humble opinion, a man truly of the people, always surprising and never complying. I'm joined in this quest by two returning co-hosts, the Slinger of Ink and the trainer of penguins, Mr. Alan Henderson, and comics podcaster, editor and a fan of the Peanut, Eamonn Clarke. Gentlemen, how are you?
Greetings.
Yeah, greetings, Tony and Alan. And for Alan, can I just say, with reference to my last appearance, wish you were here.
To be honest, I was listening in and went, I wish I was there as well. We wish I'd been here for both of your recent discussions.
Oh, okay,
particularly
nice.
in terms of, well, I wish I'd been there for the research, definitely. I think it's possibly they do need to make the trip to the university at some point in time to dig through the Giles back catalogue.
It was lovely, man. You'd have loved it. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a trip for you, though, isn't it? It's a morning's drive for us.
One of these days.
Yeah, definitely. Have you been to? Is there stuff at the Dundee University you can go and see? Is there or?
I don't know about the university, but DC Thompson certainly used to have its own archive.
Right.
And whether that's still in Dundee or if the place is somewhere else, I don't know. And there were open door days and things like that where you could go and see bits and pieces. It'd be a long time since I've done any of that, but it was, they certainly have that.
They're quite closed, aren't they? A lot of the time, we never seem to sort of penetrate their outer shell, do we? You're right, man. I agree. No, completely. Yeah.
That's what they're. It's much like if you go to New York, or where you used to be able to go to New York without fear of whatever. And you would walk past the DC building and you go, "Is that it?" And you go, "It's a set of offices. Of course, there's nothing."
I'll just wander in. Yeah.
For Joe Public, different if you were actually working there, could be behind, beyond the reception if you wanted.
I guess it's the same with 2000 AD, Eamonn, isn't it? You couldn't just wander into 2000 AD. You'd say, "Hello, I'm a fan."
Can I come and stand by the statue? Take a picture, please.
Yeah. Good. Well, we've gathered here together to talk. That's very church-like, isn't it? To talk about a certain cartoonist. Did you want to talk about? Did you want to introduce who it was, Alan?
Yeah. So, the history of British comics has a golden thread of comedy and the absurd. I think that goes all the way back to the beginnings of probably Punch magazine and what you would see through that. And that golden thread continues through the DC Thompson line that we just talked about, which for generations of British kids was the first introduction into comics. And that continues through to being championed today by the anarchic guys at Viz and the like. And along the way, that comedy and absurdness has picked up people like Giles and Scarf, that previously of this parish.
Yeah.
But there was also a thread that picked up from that about the UK underground comic scene, heavily impacted by Rum and people like Gilbert Shelton. And that brings us to Hunt Emerson, who we're going to be talking about, who has that mix of satire with the irrelevant and the cheeky, bringing together what, in general, is a comic style that I've seen described as the surreal slapstick. And I thought that was a really nice sort of terminology for describing.
Yeah, I like that, man. Yeah.
And it's a case of Hunt has been stalwart of the British comic scene, and I keep using the word British because I think his style and comedy that the way he both writes and draws is very British in terms of its positioning in terms of the stylistic comic world. And he is the stalwart of that, and has been a core of the British community that has allowed him to be one of the grandfathers of where we are today, I think, in terms of British comics and underground comics.
No, it's a good summation, man. The Gilbert thing as well is the closest, I feel, sometimes. So we're going to talk about comparisons in a bit, I guess. But yeah. Eamonn, where did you first come across him? I've tried to think this, and I can't remember where I came across him first. Do you know? Can you remember anything?
Oh, I think I know. I think the answer I'm supposed to give is in the bushes of a railway siding. But
we'll get onto that, definitely.
I'll get onto that. But I think the real answer is I saw him doing issue 5 of the Diceman comic when he did You Are Ronnie Reagan with Pat Mills. And then it's Calculus Cat. So I think I'm going to say I'm probably the least qualified on Hunt Emerson in this chat at the moment. But for me, Calculus Cat, and as you know from the WhatsApp messages we had exchanged in advance with yourself and Alan, I'm curious as to which, slight digression here, I'm curious as to which fanzine I read a review of the 1987 collection of Calculus Cat in, which prompted me to buy it. I've got a feeling the review might have been written by Paul Gravett, but that might have been a bit self-serving because, Alan, Calculus Cat was already appearing in Paul Gravett's Escape magazine, I think. Is that right?
Oh, okay.
Yes, it would have been.
Yeah. But anyway, so You Are Ronnie Reagan, You Are Maggie Thatcher, with also at Pat Mills, and then Calculus Cat in 1987, which really, the review really appealed to me, and I got the collection. And we'll talk about Calculus Cat in a moment, what a marvellous creation that is.
Yeah, good stuff. What about you, Al? Well, can you remember where you first come across it?
So, recognised, it wouldn't have actually been until Bristol 2002 or something like that. And that's because, to be honest, at that point in time, or prior to that, there was a lot of the British creators, particularly where they were appearing in magazines like Escape or even the newspaper appearances. You didn't know who they were, or I didn't know who they were. Certainly. And it wasn't until you went to something like a Bristol comic convention or Comic Expo as it was, and you would see a murderer's row of these are the British black and white comic creators of things that exist that you are aware of but don't know who they are, and that would be for people like Roger Langridge, Lou Springer, and Brian Talbot would be in that sort of section of all sitting along piece.
The Strangehaven guy is always there, I remember as well. Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff where you're going, I see their work but I don't know who they are. And Emerson would have been part of that, and that would certainly have gone, on that's certainly how I would have met him. And first met him was one of those Bristols. And again, it was for things like you'd see the collections of Calculus Cat, you'd see City Mouth as being part of that as well. And you'd be like, right, that's the beauty of going to a comic convention where you go, I see the things I don't see otherwise.
I think I would probably have recognised his style before anything else, almost, because he appeared in so many places. I've gone, oh, that's all you. Almost, I think would be. Yeah, because you said to me though you must have met him at Bristol because we both although we weren't friends then we both went to Bristol all the time. I must have done, man. I just can't remember it. Yeah. What about you, Eamonn? You met him recently at is it Lawless? You met him at, didn't you?
Yeah, he was at this year's Lawless in Bristol. That sort of, in a way, I guess, has taken over the Bristol convention scene. Lawless, and Lawless, for anyone who doesn't know, is a smallish convention that focuses on British comics. It's very sort of 2000 AD, but it does other British comics.
Yeah.
And this year, I think for the first time, they had Hunt Emerson there. And when it gets quiet at Lawless, obviously Simon Bisley and Brian Bolland still have their big queues the whole weekend, but people like Hunt Emerson just sitting there at their table, and you can get up, you get there, you can chat with them, you can talk to them about stuff, you can get stuff signed. Hunt Emerson is one of those cartoonists, a bit like Brian Talbot at Enniskillen this year, actually. Brian Talbot's doing the same. And we've talked about this on the continent, that they all do this on the continent. But when you get a book from Hunt Emerson, if you buy the book from him, he's going to do you a little doodle cartoon inside the front of the cover.
Yeah.
So I bought Dante's Inferno from him and got this delightful cartoon inside it. He also had a folder full of original art for sale. He had these A4 cartoons that he'd previously done. which were a £5 each, and I
Bloody
couldn't
hell.
believe it. I thought, I cannot believe. I had to ask him. I said, "Are these like originals?" He said, "Oh yeah, those are originals, not prints." And I bought you one.
You did. You bought a picture of my dog. Yeah.
Yes.
It's now up on the wall in my office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's there. He is delightful. He is absolute delight to chat to. He's a funny guy. He's got books to sell. He's got original art to sell. I bought, would you believe, a Calculus Cat page from him this very week as we speak.
Oh, did you? What, since you've been back, you mean?
Since I've been back,
Right.
I gave in and bought one of his pages, which, with postage is still going to come out at under £145, which I think is very reasonable.
That is mad. Considering we were just chatting about some of it was $288,000.
Well, for a jock page, yeah. £288,000. Dollars rather. Anyway, yeah, so there he was at Lawless. And if you get a chance, I hope he does more.
Yeah.
And if you get a chance, go up to him, have a chat, get a book. His books are like a tenner each, so they're not expensive. And buy one of his £5 cartoons, and you'll have a great time.
Yeah. Funny enough, I interviewed Sue Hedrell, who runs Lawless, a couple of weeks before the event, and she said, Hunt Emerson's going to be there. So that's brilliant. You don't see him at enough things, really. And I said, where do you know him from? And she said she knew him from the Fortean Times. That's where that's why she contacted him, which is quite nice. Which we'll maybe mention that collection later. But Al, I hope you don't mind me saying you've recently bought some art from him as well. Have you not?
So yeah, I got a Hot Jazz strip recently, actually because I could not find my old copy of Hot Jazz, so I thought I'll get a copy of the Hot Jazz off him, and I was like, oh well. And again, much like Eamonn says, you're kind of like going, went to his website to get it, and like, fine. It's like, here's some art. It's like, actually, you know what? For the sake of just adding it in, thank you very much. And so that was that. Again, we'll come back round with the art piece as well, because he used to be a stalwart at so many of the UK conventions.
Yeah.
He was always at the Bristol. He was always at the Birmingham one.
Bix. Yeah.
Bix. Thank you. And the like. And it was mainly as well. And he was part of the Knockabout comics.
Yeah, he's synonymous with Knockabout for me, I think. Yeah.
Knockabout is the leading UK publisher of underground comics.
I'd say.
Collecting of underground comics.
Absolutely.
In terms of formal publisher of comics.
Yeah. In fact, Gilbert Shelton was their first. I think Gilbert Shelton was their first book, wasn't it? Followed by him, he was their second published book, as I understand it.
I know they were the people that brought Gilbert Shelton to the UK.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Tony Bennett was really responsible for that. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. But yeah, his artwork is very accessible if you want a piece, and presents very nicely. And
it's newspaper strip sized. Is that the one you bought? Is that right?
The one I bought is on A4 piece of paper.
Oh, okay.
Half of the A4, so it's A4 on landscape, and only one half of it is filled in.
I see.
So it's slightly bigger.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool.
Again,
what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through some of his history, and I think this stuff that will come up very much so in it. Born in Newcastle upon Tyne, in a village called Walbottle, in 1952. I think he retains his Geordie accent. Do you? Even though he's not been there for donkey's years, I think I can still catch it. But he quickly moved to Birmingham, where he went to art school, where he continues to draw in a cluttered attic, I think is the phrase. He's the director of the Handsworth Creative Group, and he's been such a director since 2012. And he's really, for me, embedded in that Birmingham scene. His LinkedIn bio says, specialising in big noses, how big do you want it to be? That's his little bio. If we all had LinkedIn profiles as cool as that. Yeah, so he moved to Birmingham for his art school course, and he'd mistakenly done a painting course, which he just really didn't take to. And so he dropped out. And he worked in various jobs, including he worked in a prison, he was a postman, he worked in a library, before sort of Comics for the Next started calling to him. But he's very closely associated with the time with the Birmingham Slab Art Centre, the Slab Art Centre was a thing at the time, but I think the Birmingham one was the most well recognised. Has that come up in any of your research, guys? Have you seen all that? Because there's a few people went to it. It really surprised me. Ken Loach, Kevin O'Neill, and Brian Talbot also were known at those places. He worked at.
This was all just down the road from where I was growing up, and
Is
I didn't
this?
know about it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, no, I read all about this and I was fascinated. This slightly anarchist Birmingham Arts Lab with, as you say, Talbot and Kevin O'Neill and Hunt Emerson.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's incredible,
astonishing.
Isn't it? Yeah, and I mean those collectives.
The studio.
Is it? Yeah, but in my opinion, better. He is. In fact, he mentions pop art as an influence, doesn't he? And Duchamp as well, I think, as some of his influences. In 1979, he became a full-time freelance cartoonist. I think he said he describes himself as a cartoonist because he says calling yourself an artist is too heavy a responsibility. And then he says, but on his passport it says graphic designer. I don't know what he means by that because it doesn't say things like that on passports. But that's what he said.
You do put your job occupation in your application for a passport. Right?
I guess.
But
I guess.
Again,
yeah.
This whole thing about being part of a scene and stuff. This ties into the fact that I truly believe he's one of the, and calling himself a cartoonist, he's a raconteur. And what I mean by that is, much like many of the people that fall into that being a cartoonist now, it's not just about the cartooning in terms of saying this is the comic strip and getting it out. It is about saying it's part of the broader art piece. So he would be as equally at home doing a huge mural on the side of a wall and saying this is, or designing for that at least, and going, this is what's out there, through to poster work for whatever, through to music album cover art, which he has done.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, and again, then when you look at the breadth of the work that he's published, which goes from really what you would call kid friendly by being in Beano and Dandy,
yeah,
all the way through to the most adult and mature work as possible. And again, it is that he will turn his hand to just about anything in terms of that and going, yes, I will produce artwork that is in a cartoony style, or what we would call a cartoony style. And that's why I think he would say, I am a cartoonist.
Yeah.
And I think that is the interesting thing about it. It's the same with Martin Rowlandson. I think it's similar to that, where it's okay, so I will do that whole, do the satirical work in the newspaper piece, but I'll quite happily do Gulliver's Travels as
that is true, man.
Well.
Yeah,
and that sort of mix and match. And again, it's this ability to go, yeah, I'm here to do work. I'm here to use my art to tell my stories and tell the things that I want to tell, regardless of what they are, and I don't need to be pigeonholed into that particular piece.
You're right, man. And the easy comparison for me, I don't know if you agree with this as well, Eamonn, is scarf. I find there's a scarf quality there somewhere. Would you agree, Eamonn, or?
Well, certainly in nose size, it would be a cartoon of nose size. Yes, I mean, having, you and I have done a bit of a dive on Gerald Scarfe. Yes, I can see the links. I mean, I'm also going to link him to two other cartoonists that the three of us have talked about in the past, which is on that spectrum from Robert Crumb at one end to Carl Giles at the other, and I put Hunt Emerson somewhere in the middle there, between them, where the line becomes perhaps more fully rounded and exact in Carl Giles than it does in Crumb, and somewhere in the middle is Hunt Emerson. But Scarfe, he's sort of linked to all the great British cartoonists in a way, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I know he talks, and thanks to Dan Berry for the interview he did with him in Make It Then Tell Everyone. He talks a lot about his growing up and his sort of influences growing up, and he was saying his mum and dad didn't like him reading the Beano and the Dandy, but they liked him reading the Eagle. But he was desperate to read those humour books, and people like Ken Reid, I can see a little bit of a Ken Reid there somewhere as well.
Oh, very much,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I think the interesting one about the Giles comparison, that there's something there. So Hunt is clearly got the British sensibilities that Crumb doesn't have, which is about knowing where to push the line and still keep it a little bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily true Crumb does. But there is something then about the British class system that kicks into play, where Hunt's work is much more of the people, while Giles's work is much more of the establishment in terms of the way
Okay.
it presents itself.
Yeah, it's much
You
more
know,
newspaper, isn't it? It's yeah,
well,
yeah.
it is once was Daily Express and once the you know
The
was
Times.
Fiesta.
Yeah,
The
yeah. Good point.
and I think, but again, this is where it's a spider's web of comic creators that we can have, and which is great. And you want people on all those different points across it, and Hunt falls very much into that piece, but then has led and influenced so many people that I think that come after him.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can't remember the quote now from the TCJ, but they say something along the lines of he's the primary underground comic artist in the UK, and I agree with them.
Yeah.
But he's more than that to me. He is. I think I put in our notes before we started. I'd make a case that he's the comics artist of the people, because it's not just for us comic fans. It's not just for underground comics fans. It's not just for Beano fans. It's not just for people who like the odd page in the Fortean Times or even Fiesta or Razzle, which he's appeared in. His work appeals to such a broad spectrum of people that he's almost like, how he's not been in Viz, I don't know.
Yeah, that did throw me. I was like, well, obviously, his Viz reference, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, I couldn't find one. Yeah,
No.
no, I thought you'd think they'd snap him up. Yeah. Let's go back to, because going back to his history quickly. So we're going to talk about the Firkin the Cat in Fiesta shortly, but something you brought up in the chat, Alan, is the music reference, which he did start. That was in the 80s, early 80s, and there's stuff there that we've all seen, but none of us realised was him until we started looking into it.
And again, this ties into this whole how cultures are integrated. So clearly, if you were in the ska music scene in the early 80s, everything, or post punk or
mod or something, yeah,
where you were part of a movement, and art was part of that movement, and it was all integrated. And so it's obvious that you would go, well, yes, we'll get comic artists or cartoonists to be involved as part of that. And Hunt created an image called the Beat Girl. Now, anybody of a certain age or anybody that's listened to any sort of ska music will have seen the Beat Girl. It's an image of a girl knocking her hips out to one side, and it's quite angular. It's very, to be honest, if you'd asked me who designed it, I might have said Ryan Hughes, but that's all the wrong time. But
it's very stencily, isn't it? For me, it's almost like yeah,
and angular and the like. And that was Hunt. Actually, and I know the image, aware of the image. Didn't know it was his until we did this little bit of research. But again, I think he's also been involved in producing, as I say, poster work and all this sort of stuff for other bands in terms of doing their picks. And again, it's part of that. It's not cartooning as being something separate to culture in itself. It's part of the mix, and saying, how do these things come together? So when you're talking about him being an artist of the people, I think that's part of that, about saying how it's just it's there. You see it, you accept it, and you go, yes, but you don't necessarily know who it is that's done it.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. Bear in mind, he was so close to you growing up, Eamonn. Were you into ska music? Did we have Eamonn Clarke in his pork pie hat wandering around the streets of the Midlands?
I spent quite a lot of time looking at the mirror in my bathroom.
We've already had the wish you were here, the wall conversation about how it bored us. So I'm guessing
that's the second musical gag for this episode that I've made. Absolutely. And Alan is spot on. If you have flirted with ska music at any point in your musical history, you've seen this image, and you've probably thought to yourself, Hunt Emerson drew that.
Yeah,
really, because it is pushing out. He did the cover for the Beat, one of their albums as well, didn't he? He painted a cover for one of their albums.
I believe he then didn't like the music of the next album, so therefore said, "It's not really for me." I'm not
That's why I like him. I like this sort of shit. You know what I mean? I like this.
It's not just a PD.
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
yeah, I absolutely loved that music at the time. No idea until sort of researching this that he did that artwork.
Yeah.
For Tony's multiple American listeners, that is the band The English Beat.
Yes.
I believe they're known across the pond.
They are indeed. Yeah. It falls in again with Crumb, but also people like Klaus and more underground artists of the day today who do album covers. I know that's something Valpy's interested in doing. But yeah, it always seems to fall to that crew, doesn't it? I've got a Billy Childish Klaus cover downstairs, and really surprised me that he'd done that. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so he's kind of made his home in Birmingham. He's still there. He's involved in doing illustrations for the brewery, I believe, the local brewery and stuff like that. So let's have a little chat about some individual books. What did you want to talk about, Eamonn? You had a couple that you want to bring up.
Well, I mean, my favourite, I think, is still Calculus Cat.
Yeah.
And Calculus Cat takes us back to George Herriman and Crazy Cat, which I know we all mentioned in our notes. And one of the fundamental sort of gags that George Herriman did in Crazy Cat is that the mouse, who I believe is named Ignatz, throws a brick at Crazy Cat. So Crazy Cat is, for anybody who doesn't know this wonderful cartoon, Crazy Cat has a job, and the cat's job is to run around the streets with this ridiculous grin on its face while people throw bricks and bottles at the cat.
Right.
And then every evening after work, he gets home, he slumps in front of the television, he has these mad conversations with this talking television, because all he wants to do is sort of like veg out and watch old American TV shows, which his TV will not show him because it's too busy advertising. I believe they're Squeaky Wheats.
That's right.
The cereal.
Yeah.
It is. Now, this is funny because we mentioned this, and recently on my other podcast, I've done an episode about the Drunken Bakers.
Yes, enjoyed that one, man. Yeah.
And if you want some existential bleakness, but done in Hunt Emerson's cartoon hilarity fashion, then Calculus Cat, which was reissued and a new collection in 2014. Alan's got both collections with him at the moment.
Alan for you, though, isn't it?
Completist.
That's because I would have picked first one up way back in 2000
at Bristol.
Yeah. The Bristol deal, and then, as you say, there was then the Kickstart.
Yeah,
was the...
we all had to back it.
Everyone loves a hardcover. Loves a hardcover.
Good point. Yeah.
So anyway, it's a black and white cartoon. It's about this cat. It's about the sort of bleakness of the working life. It is, in a way, I suppose, a little bit about us talking about comics, because comics and cartoons are the stuff that we feel makes life fun. Because jobs and commercialism and everything like that does not make life fun.
Yeah.
My favourite, I think, is Calculus Cat still, although I've been reading quite a lot of Hunt Emerson the last few weeks. And I've got this nice 2014, again, it was only a tenner paperback, which is filled in the back full of Calculus Cat cartoons done by his various colleagues and admirers, including some extremely famous names.
Yeah.
The aforementioned Gilbert Shelton being one of them.
Yeah, there's some really great stuff.
I think, both the back of the Calculus Cat book and the back of the more recent collection of Hot Jazz demonstrates his position in the comic community. And the fact that how recognised he is as being somebody important. The fact that so many artists, not just in the UK, but some of the American underground and a number of European artists feature in the portfolio sections at the back of both of those books. and it is, as you know, as Eamonn said there, the great and the good, because it's also includes people like Dave McKean, Doug Braithwaite,
Amazing.
your friend Bob Fingerman.
Yeah, brilliant.
Somebody I really like was Trent Abel, and
Yeah,
and there's even
like
a
Trent's
Charles,
work.
there's even a Charles Burns piece.
I know that
in
was
there,
that really
right?
surprised me. Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
though. And you can point out in both books there are two Keith Burns pieces where it's World War II fighter bomber planes with
yeah.
the one of them's got Calculus Cat painted on it as if it's the thing, and the other one's got the
That's
Max
an example
Zillion
of I don't care what you do, just do what you like, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah,
There was no
yeah,
stage direction
yeah.
in that one, was there? Yeah. I also noticed just a quick one for you, Eamon, is Chris Welch has
Yes.
done a page in that, who comes back to when we talked about Nasty Tales over at the Mega City Book Club a couple of weeks ago.
The Trials of Nasty Tales, Chris Welch, and here is a Chris Welch cartoon in the back of the book of Calculus Cat supporting the giant television on his struggling shoulders. Yeah, great stuff.
If you buy the Calculus Cat at the moment, it's good value. It's only, as we say, it's $9.99. That is incredible value for this book. It does come with there was, I think they obviously, mate, we've all been there. There was like a print problem, so there's a loose page 50. I'm not bothered by that. That's no bother to me. But it's quite nice to have. Cool. Is there anything else? Any other ones you want to mention while you're at it?
Well, I will go on to talk about his adaptations of the great classics, so classic literature. But I'll let Alan pick one, or maybe we'll get to Fiesta Magazine.
Let's do a round table. Go on, you pick one, Al, and then I'll have a little go at some porn for you.
I'll do the hot jazz piece first, and then I'll come back to another one as well when we talk about original art. So, hot jazz is his love letter to his love of jazz. He is actually a musician as well. That's his other point of bringing into this.
And a Tai Chi instructor. I just thought I'd get that in there while we were chatting.
But hot jazz is the story of Max Zillion, a fortunate saxophonist in the anamorphic style. And it gives the highs and lows of his musical genius. And it's this vibrant, surreal thing of going, how does he get noise to come out of his saxophone, and all the different representations of what sounds might look like, which is a really interesting thing about how do you represent music in a comic.
Ever since Mary Jane danced in the front room that time, we've been struggling, haven't we? Yeah.
But it is this whole, particularly when you try to do jazz, where you can suddenly go, oh, actually the shapes make different, tubes and lightning effects, and also have to try to do this whole weird and wonderful effects. And it's just full of visual gags and that, expressive exaggeration that kind of echoes the spontaneity of a jazz solo. And it's a collection of many different stories through time.
Yeah. Some colour, some black and white, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, available from largecow.com and his shop in there for absolutely
$11.99
peanuts.
Mate, there's comics on the shelves in Gosh that are more expensive than that, and they're like 20 pages. Yeah.
And it's 152 pages, and if you buy it direct from Hunt, he'll sign it, and in mine he's drawn a nice little saxophone. So it's like, again, it's surreal. It's you do need to take a little bit of a breath to get into it.
Yeah.
A lot of it's for a book about music. There's a big section of it that's silent. But what I mean by that is wordless. And so there is that whole, how do I read the music to learn jazz and play the jazz and what's.
Yeah. I think this may be my favourite work of his. Genuinely, I think it's so detailed. There's such energy in it for me. When he blows that sax, so that it just transforms a page, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, Al, I wanted to name check a couple of the people in the back. You got Jay Lynch does a page. I mean, how cool is that? The Dave McKean page is worth the price of entry on its own for me. Just gorgeous. Mark Stafford's page is brilliant. It's like someone's in a record shop. And Ryan Hughes is in there as well. I mean, we've talked about him before. Peter Bag's in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely who's, and as I say,
Yeah,
you don't get to ask these sorts of people to say, "Can I put something in the back of my book that you've drawn?"
yeah,
without being recognised as a very important person.
yeah, yeah. There is that argument to be made. He's an artist, isn't he? And for someone who, well, let's talk a little bit about this now, and we'll go back to some of our favourite books. But he has says that one, he doesn't read comics, and two, he makes them to pay the mortgage, essentially. How do you feel about that? What do you think, Eamonn? Have you got any opinions on that?
Well, this is my theory about the lack of pension plans for comic book creators.
Yeah.
We've talked about this on and off air. Nobody ever discusses really how much they get paid or don't get paid. There is no pension plan for the majority of these, particularly the underground guys, I think. Yeah. And so I think Hunt Emerson lives fairly modestly in Handsworth and Birmingham, which is why I was so sort of like, in a way, excited to see him at Lawless and to encourage people to pick up his books and his artwork, because they're cheap. As we've said, they give us great enjoyment. They're the good bits of life. They're the squeaky wheats of life. So, yeah, I mean, you know, we talk about the economics. I never understand it. I don't understand how comic conventions work. I don't understand who's getting paid for what, Tony.
And me neither, man. Yeah.
I hope Alan. I hope Alan's getting paid.
He gets paid a lot. We know.
I hope Hunt Emerson is getting paid.
Sorry, Eamonn, is Tony not paying you to be here? Oh.
I hope he's making some money off these books and artwork, even if he's not consuming the media himself anymore. Interesting for the Calculus Cat discussion. He doesn't watch TV either.
He doesn't, does he? That was another thing I was surprised. He likes listening to the Radio 4 and stuff, I think he was saying. If you don't mind me just jumping in there, Al, with my thought on this, is if it was like a Marvel writer who was writing the X-Men and they said, I don't really read comics, I think I would have a different opinion. But because it's him, and this is everything sort of is this sort of stream that comes out of his own head, there's no sort of continuity heavy aspect to it. And the joy is in the sort of black and white inky psychedelia that he's doing for us. I've got no problem with that at all. He clearly does know comics, so the grounding is there. All that I need from him is there. So I can just enjoy them almost like a siloed off thing sometimes. What do you think, Al?
Well, you don't need to read current comics. That's maybe part of the thing. I think
not many people do.
And so he has the training and background. And in terms of just doing it to pay the rent, again, I don't have a problem with that, because so much of this sort of comic art should be disposable. It's right to be disposable. It's what we've got wrong about some of the comic world at large. It's not supposed to be about collecting. It's supposed to be about reading and enjoyment. And going, that when we started putting comics in bags and boards, that's when things started to go wrong. When we stopped putting them in our back pocket and just going to our friend, there you go. I used to get the Dandy as a kid. My best mate used to get the Beano halfway through the week. And that was it. You didn't go, oh, I've got a big collection. And therefore, I think it's the same with being a comic artist of this style, where you can go, if I'm drawing a cartoon for the local brewery to sell that month's beer of the month, fine. That's disposable. That and it's you can look at advertising as being high art at times, but in reality, it's a case of no. It's about getting the thing over and done. And it's the same with, in many ways, it's the same with Giles and Scarf and the like. If you're putting a cartoon into a newspaper, it's for that day.
Yeah,
that's a good point. It's doing that thing, and going. That's where it has its impact. Then move on. Yes, you've got collections. Yes, you've got the ability to look back as a retrospective. But in many ways, it is for the here and now. That's, and nobody turns around to soap opera actors and goes, "Do you think you're creating art?" And they go, "Well, no, I'm doing this just to pay the bills, so I can then go off and make the thing I want to make when I've got a little bit of money built up." So is that the same? Or I imagine it's exactly the same for someone like Hunt, where you'll go, "Yeah, there's things I want to do that are my books, but frankly, if somebody wants to pay me whatever just to do advertising work or just to put stuff into the Fortean Times, fine, I'll do it, bang, because that's what pays the bills and moves it on to something else."
Yeah,
and I
right,
think
man.
there is a need to distinguish between the two.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what you say there about the dandy and the Beano is rolling them up and putting in your back pocket is a phrase you and I have used a number of times when we've been chatting. But that's what the undergrounds were as well. The undergrounds were... That's the reason you can't find like mint copies of underground comics a lot of the time, is because it was just for stoners to show to their mates and giggle at and pass around, and were put in second-hand shops and crap like that. That's why it is. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, speaking of disposable things, let's move on to pornographic magazines. I know your in-depth collection there, Alan, is you're missing a couple of issues of Razzle Readers' Wives.
Yep.
So Firkin is kind of, in a way, a bit of an outlier for this stuff. I think I've kind of always been aware of it, that it's been about. It's always been sort of talked about and stuff. I wasn't a particular subscriber to Razzle, or not Razzle, to Fiesta, because it was... am I right in saying on the totem pole of pornographic magazines, it's sort of below mid-tier? I'm going to say it's below mid-table. Is it right?
I'm not touching your totem pole.
But this is the thing about Hunt, is he does such long-running projects, incredibly long-running, almost like, for me, like record-breaking in relation to British comics creations. And he'd done some spot illustrations for Fiesta Magazine, and they asked him to do a strip in January 1981. And the magazine closed in 2020. So all that time he was doing Firkin or comic strips for them. I think the one a friend showed me once was like they'd done like an X-Files gag one, I think, at one point. I'm not sure where that was.
It will have.
Yeah, but it's written by Tim Manley, who his other claim to fame, apart from he was in, I bought a copy of Talking Turkey, which is a kind of UK underground magazine, which he used to do a column in it, Tim Manley, as well. So it wasn't just porn magazines, but his other claim to fame is he claims to have created the Readers' Wives thing, which was allegedly people used to send pictures of themselves or their wives into the paper to get their naked partner in the paper. I don't know what that's moved on to these days, but I was surprised Fiesta ran till 2020. I just thought top shelf magazines were a thing of many, many years ago, but it seems to have run on. It's very, very, very puerile, but is designed in that way. I don't know whether people will know this, but I've got I've got quite a puerile sense of humour, and even some of these I was like, oh, you went there. I was reading one today where the man is stuck on a desert island, and he wanted to have sex so much he thought, if I run round fast enough I might be able to have sex with myself from behind, and so he runs around an island trying to catch himself from behind. So there's some interesting logic in some of these, perhaps of them all not the one for everyone, but yeah, Hunt appears in it, as does Tim. Appears in a couple of pages I'm looking at now. There were some of them were like 4 pages long as well. For some of them were colour, some of them were black and white. Some of them were the sort of two, he'd add a purple tone to it and stuff like that. But interesting. I suppose if anything, it shows that you can turn his hand to anything, I guess.
Yeah, the two things I would say, and then maybe I'm just overreading it, but there is a number of occurrences in the book of a man in a long, with a hat, big nose, obviously, and moustache, and I'm convinced it's from that he's actually drawn.
Interesting.
In the book.
Yeah, so for people to know, Firkin is the cat, actually, that appears in it.
If I see that one there, for
Oh,
example,
yeah,
the image to everybody,
I'm
where
right
am I
on with
going?
you.
That looks like thing.
Yeah.
But this is also a book where, I mean, I read a lot of your work, Tony, so it takes a lot to shock me. But there is a panel in this, and I will not share it to the Slack. I don't know, but it's the first time I've been properly shocked by a panel in a long, long time. And all I'll say is the reference to the Holy Trinity. Yeah, it's wrong.
Yeah.
So,
He
Eamonn, I
does.
know that we made you read a Crumb book that you found difficulty with.
It's wash
That
your
comedy,
eyes.
The
Yeah,
Crumb
wash
list.
your eyes out, didn't you?
I,
Yeah.
I would say this is as aggressive as that. But, it's considerably much more funny.
Yeah, he gets away with
Um,
the humour more than Crumb for me, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that is that British sensibility versus
Yeah.
where Crumb goes. But yeah, it's not the book for you, Eamon. I would have said.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Despite the fact it's another cat. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Now we're into cats. But the thing is, it's there are some old school. I don't want to call them old school. There are some dated sensibilities in it. I was reading a strip in Talking Turkey where a policewoman comes around someone's house, falls into a hole, and she's chasing a sort of, the classic hoop shirt, hat, escape from prisoner. And this fat policewoman falls into a hole and he has sex with her from behind. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not getting that. I don't like that very much. Yeah, let's not use the word, but that's not quite right. Did you have another one you wanted to mention, Eamon?
Well, let's just talk about. I will mention the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and let's just again acknowledge his range.
Yeah,
that he can do a monthly cartoon for Fiesta Magazine, while at the same time he is also working for the Beano, and he is working on adaptations of some sort of like notable classics of literature. So Dante's Inferno, Casanova, Lady Chatterley's Lover, I've read, and here is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Hunt Emerson.
I think I'm going to say Lady Chatterley's was that the first big success that led to the others? Is that right?
I think so, and that's the one that might make sense because I think is still in black and white, whereas I think the others are in colour. This one is coloured by Carol Bennett, who's one of the Knockabout people, isn't she? Knockabout Comics,
yeah,
I think.
Yes.
Anyway, so he does these cartoon adaptations of these classics. I don't think I'm ever going to have time in my life to read Dante's Inferno, the original, but I feel like I've read it now because I've read Hunt Emerson's adaptation with another one of his sort of collaborators.
Classic Comics are for.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. What Classic Comics are for. He did that with one of his collaborators, Kevin Jackson, who sadly is no longer with us. And what I'd say in particular about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but I think it applies to all of them, is he has that skill that the cartoonist must have, which is his drawings are essentially funny.
Yeah.
Everything about them is funny.
Yeah.
And he also does that thing, which is I'm going to have a panel which shows the albatross, which shows the ship, whatever, shows the sailors. I need to make as much of that panel funny as I can. So, I'm not just going to do the central gag for the panel. I'm also going to put extra gags in the background. His line is amusing, but the background detail is just hilarious as well. And I mean, he's not above introducing fart gags or whatever into Samuel Coleridge's timeless classic. But that's what I love about it, is that, you look at the panel and you think that's great. And then you look closer and you think, oh, that's really good. Because there's background detail, there's stuff going on. We've seen it so many times. when we've talked about it. We see it in the Penguin with Alan. You know, your central drawing is funny, but you can use other stuff to make other gags, build other gags in there as well. So yeah, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Coleridge and Hunt Emerson, or any of his adaptations of the classics. What range, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree, man. And I think the thing is, I think I heard him say in an interview that with Lady Chatterley, someone else obviously wrote it, and they just stripped out everything that wasn't funny and sex.
Right.
But I think you're right though. Everything he draws is funny. He's just got that funny bone, isn't he? That it's just you can just tell. He must have been an influence on you, Alan, when you were doing the Penguin. Is he?
Subconsciously.
Yeah, I reckon.
Say yes.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
You're talking about a background gag as well. So one of the things, the only thing I was going to bring up was he has done the full mainstream in that he in the Bizarro World collection from DC Comics. There is a 5-page strip called The Batman Operetta. It's actually written by Paul Grist, in the arts by Hunt Emerson.
I didn't realise it was by Paul Grist. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so Paul wrote it.
Right.
Hunt drew it, and the colouring was actually done by Phil Elliott. So it's completely a UK I think. It's Batman meets Gilbert and Sullivan. Right? That's the best way to describe it as a shorthand. Now, for me, it's really important because in my collecting of comic art, this was the first time I have all 5 pages of this, and this was the first time I had a complete story.
Right.
Of the original. So it was like, and again, it was meeting Hunt at whatever event and going, you've got this. It's pretty cheap. Fine, let's have all 5. Bang.
Yeah.
But there's a gag within it that you just mix in that there are 3 background singers, right, who are just people of the street type thing. It's let's say that Gilbert and Sullivan background singers, and there's one of them that in panel 1 is holding a broom, and they don't really change their stance or layout throughout the 5 pages. They're all standing on the side, but in every single panel, she's holding something different. So it starts off as one type of broom, then it changes to a different type of broom, then it's a fishing rod, then it's a snooker cue, then it's a mop, then and then it's a toilet brush, and you're like going, where did that come from? And it's just, there's no mention of it. It's only when you start studying the page to go, what else is in there?
Very Mad Magazine for me. There's a little bit of the Mad Magazine there somewhere. Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing. I refuse to believe that Paul Grist wrote that. I have to believe that Hunt Emerson added that as part of his storytelling, because it's the sort of thing where I don't know what collaboration went into the creation of this particular strip, but that's the one that I would. That's the only other one, as I say, I would call it.
And you've got all 5 pages of that.
Yeah.
Ah, nice. Yeah. So, you are a saucy gangster. I've said it before.
They can be found, and if you want to see them, you can see them on comicartfans.com.
Good man, good. The last one we'll do, I think, of the different comics is Phenomenix, which is the very long running strip that he's done for the Fortean Times. Again, available through Knockabout and through his store, $22.99. Absolutely brilliant. Mostly 1-page gag stories about conspiracy theories of the world of unexplained phenomena. It's been running for so long. I think he first appeared in the Fortean Times in issue 8 in 1975. I'm not sure it's a completely unbroken run, but he's been working for them for all that time. It is incredible. Very much a multi-panel strip. So there's easily 12 panels on a page for some of this. He does appear in it sometimes himself, and it's been written by a number of different people, mostly written by a guy called Bob Rickard, who is also a Birmingham resident. And in fact, the first story in the collection is them meeting, and they met at a local bookshop called Japetus, which is stocked Hunt's large cow comics. And I think, is it Carol Moore says, you two should know each other. is the phrase she used, and she put them together, and since then they've been doing it. But interestingly, Steve Moore wrote some in 1977 as well, who's the big influence on Alan Moore, no relation, who's a really interesting fella. But yeah, Phenomenix is probably after Hot Jazz, probably my favourite thing that I've read of his, I think. Very much sort of multi-panel pages, there's a lot to it, there's a lot to read. So him doing one of them a month, back when he was doing Firkin before 2020, one of them a month, doing the Beano, I'm guessing weekly. Although I looked at the new issue of the Beano in the Motorway Services yesterday and couldn't find him in it, so I'm not sure if it's every issue he has something in there.
Does he still do that Make Me a Menace thing for the Beano?
Oh, I'm not sure, to be fair. No, I don't know. Right. What was that?
Well, kids draw. I think he draws kids as a Dennis the Menace type character.
Right.
I think was the feature that ran in the Beano. I mean, he's done various bits and pieces for the Beano over the last 25 years. Some of which he worked with Laura Howell. They sort of swapped backwards and forwards, I think. But yeah,
cool.
He was doing this feature called Make Me a Menace, where kids get to send in their pictures and he turns them into characters.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, Laura's great. We've had her on the ACP. Good people.
And I met her at Enniskillen this year.
So, did you? She was there as well, was she? Oh, nice.
Yeah, delightful.
Cool.
Yeah, she did. This is a slight tangent, but she did me that sketch in my Spider sketchbook, which is partially inspired by Alan's own Shadow, the sketch project.
Yeah, that's crack. I like it when people do that. Yeah. Is it famously? It's Jason Wood, isn't it? It's got a Domino sketch collection. Is his thing.
Okay.
And a guy Raj, who's from the EOC community, he does Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. He's just got like a book full of them. I like that. It's good, isn't it? Yeah. Good fun, good stuff. Really good. So, we're almost at the hour. So, just the big question, I guess, here is, why do you think he's not better known? He is our crumb, isn't he? In a way, well, in a big way, he's our crumb. Why do you think there's no? You can bet there's barely any podcasts with him on. There's a couple of the Comics Journal do champion him. Groth has done a couple of interviews. There's a couple of separate issues. But why hasn't he got like a cartoon? Why isn't he? Stephen Appleby, for example, is better known, but has done less work and has had cartoons on television. But I'd put Hunt Emerson easily up there.
So I think it's partially because he's a grinder, as in he does work.
Yeah.
Often say I will work. I don't think he's not into self-promotion in a big way.
Okay.
He's not there. We know certain comic people that will happily shout loudly about
turn up at a fridge opening. We know those people. Yeah.
And I think he's he's quite quiet and quite unassuming as an individual, and therefore that is part of the thing for that. I also think that there is this thing about a lot of his work is because it's for the people, if you will. Therefore, it's unassuming and it's all just you don't know it's his. And to me, a lot of the Beano artists fall into this, and a lot of the newspaper comic strip artists fall into this as well, in terms of putting aside your Bill Waters and stuff.
Yeah.
They are unknown. Right?
Yeah.
And they're not really the people that get talked about. Everybody in the UK knows George and Lynn, but doesn't know who the comic artists are that are involved in producing it.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think there's some of that he is just an artist. And he, and therefore, he is very influential and has been working on books that are a little bit outside the norm in terms of, even doing things like the Ancient Mariner. It's not something that draws people in.
Yeah, it's not Forbidden Planet fodder, is it, or something like that? I suppose.
But nor is he the new sexy thing. There's a bit of him being in the wrong time. If he was kicking off now with a lot of this stuff, he might be the darling of the Guardian.
Yeah.
But he missed that wave of being the graphic novelist.
It's weirdly refreshing, I'm going to say. I quite like it that he's just his own man. It's a shame, like we say, that he has to sort of really put the work in, and he talks a lot about that on Dan Berry's podcast. You know, he really has to graft to get it all done. What do you think, Eamon? Any thoughts on that?
I think you said it already. He doesn't blow his own trumpet to a great extent. He takes stuff that's a paying gig and then perhaps doesn't push those publishers to do more for them. He's not being, as you say, picked up by Viz. He's not being picked up particularly by The Guardian, even though I get the impression that his politics would go along with both of those publications. He lives quietly. He just does his stuff. He does things, bits and pieces that interest him. And here he is starting to turn up again at some conventions. Go out there and support his stuff is the answer from us here on the podcast.
There's not a bone in his body that isn't funny for me, I think.
Yeah.
Every strike of a pen, every drop of ink on his page is just so full of character and hilarity. I think because he's just not out there, one of those blokes out there, shouting his fucking opinions on social media every 5 minutes, which is a shame. But he allows the work to speak for itself, which I fucking absolutely admire in someone. Yeah, definitely. But this has been really fun. I think what happened was I came up with this as a theory after doing the Nasty Tales study, and with you, Eamon, and thinking, this dude, why isn't he talked about? The only people I think who are championing him maybe is John Freeman and the Lakes. I think he's been given an award through the Lakes, and I know John spoke about him quite a lot. I think, but maybe because they're close to Knockabout, I guess. What you think? You got a thoughtful face on Al. What are you thinking?
I'm trying to remember whether he was at the Lakes last year. Knockabout certainly where he must have been. Is the thing.
Yeah, I get you.
So that you're talking about an award that he also won a European award, which I did have written down, but I've lost the thing. And again, I think it is that thing again about the UK versus Europe, where he is probably better recognised as an artist in Europe.
Mad, isn't it? Ain't we mad? Yeah.
There's
Gary Groth calls him the foremost underground artist in the UK. But yeah, it's a shame. But he is great. Go and buy his stuff. It's all absolutely massively reasonably priced. If I was going to recommend one, I'd say Hot Jazz, followed by Phenomenix Comics. Both you can find from his site, or you can get them at Knockabout, and probably find them at Lakes and stuff like that, wherever Knockabout are going to be. Thank you, gentlemen. That's really good. Let's get on to guest projects, as you say on yours, Eamon. So you've just done the Daleks. I really like the Daleks one with your buddy from British Invaders.
Yeah, Brian from Canada, who I do the British Invaders podcast with. We've done the 1960s Daleks comic strips that appeared on the back page of TV Century 21 comic. Quite fascinating, particularly for Ron Turner's artwork, but also because they introduced some concepts that would later appear in the TV show in Dalek sort of.
Oh mate, the comic strip, I've had this from the horse's mouth. The comic strip was a massive influence in the Dalek double-parter, two-parter that Tennant did. With the floating platforms and all that sort of thing. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the most recent episode. As you listen to this episode of Never Iron Anything, there'll be an episode of Megacity Film Club out tomorrow talking about Duncan Jones's film Moon and its relevance to his upcoming Rogue Trooper film, which we've seen stills from this week.
That was, I'm going to say, bizarre set of stills to stick out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well.
Yeah, I just don't think they give a good impression of the movie. I'm sort of holding my. Well, I'll hold my opinion till I've seen it, but I don't think they quite give the right impression of the movie we're going to see somehow.
Yeah, I'm never sure when they leak out these early images whether they're supposed to cause the fuss that they inevitably seem to cause. I don't know. But anyway, so that's coming up, and then we're counting down to episode 300 of the podcast when we will be reviewing or counting down the top 10 2000 AD covers from the first 300 Frogs. Thank you for your votes, Tony. I've got them.
Thank you, mate.
And that will be coming up. And then also British Invaders podcast about British science fiction television, where currently we are talking about Four Feather Falls. And if you don't know what that is, I would suggest you don't bother, actually. It's not
I was watching, is it 10 Little Indians, the mystery black and white movie, and that is
the Agatha Christie title that's gone through successive purges.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Bastido, the woman from The Champions, was in it. And,
oh, right.
And all I could think of was you did some right weird drama based in Crete or somewhere, didn't you? Or Malta or something at one point.
Yes. What's that called? The Aphrodite Inheritance.
That's it.
Brian Blessed being full Brian Blessed, and with Alexandra Bastido, the lady from The Champions. A lady who, I'm not going to say haunted, but a lady who sort of like frequented the dreams of many a young British boy from that period of time, I would say. Yeah, very attractive lady.
That's the reason I think my computer is spying on me, because every time I go and look at Amazon, one of the recommended DVDs is that bloody thing, that drama keeps popping up.
The Aphrodite Inheritance, yeah.
Good stuff, good. Yeah, and we obviously did Nasty Tales, which was really fun.
Yeah, Tony's been on there recently. We've done the Trials of Nasty Tales, which is a fascinating moment in British comic book history, when comics went on trial in the early 1970s. We've also done recent episodes on The Drunken Bakers, reference Calculus Cat and Hunt Emerson, and bleak existential humour. megacitybookclub.com and britishinvaders.com for my other two podcasts. And if you're on the if you're on the Awesome Comics podcast Slack, I will post a picture of my Calculus Cat page when it arrives, hopefully next week.
Oh, bro. Nice
Alan won't be posting that page from Firkin the Cat. He might post links to.
Oh, well, I certainly won't be getting the original either.
But we might be able to post pages, links to the pages that he does own.
Good. Yeah. So what you been up to, Al? Because so Penguin's come to an end. What's your plans now, babe?
It's in syndication, so you can still see the Penguin every day because there were 10 years of it, so there's 10 years of repeats, which is fine. My current project is thinning the herd.
You are. So you're thinning out your collection a little bit, yeah.
Having recently moved my parents and having to clear out their flat in a hurry, it's led me to think I really should clear out my own stuff. And looking at some of the comics that I've got, where I'm going, I've got A, I'll never read this again, or B, another collection of this. So why am I keeping the floppies type thing? So that there's a bit of activity with that, which is leading me to open certain, as you did, Tony, yourself, when you go through a box and you suddenly go, I must remember and work through this and have a look at some of the stuff. Which also leads you to go, I have no recollection of reading some of these things ever, but I know I did.
I'm super easily influenced as well. All it took was Alan Liska on the Slack to say something about Now Comics, and I remembered I was missing some Rust issues from 40 years ago, and now they're coming in through the door, and I'm getting the side eye from the missus.
Well, if you're looking for some of the Twilight Zone Now comics, then they're currently available on eBay.
Yes.
And the like. So there's a bit of that, and then we'll just be reading and enjoying. I would like to recommend The Giant, Orson Welles, The Artist in the Shadow by Yusuf Dadawi.
Oh, is that good?
His name entirely. I think it's great. It's a biography of Orson Welles. It mentions the shadow on the cover, and there is loose references to the shadow throughout the book, including the way that he draws Orson Welles walking around with smoke coming out of his cigar, which looks like a big scarf. And so I would highly recommend that as a book to people.
We both love Orson Welles. We've talked about him before, haven't we? I know yours comes probably from his shadow voicing.
And others. I know, so that's
F for Fake is one of the best movies of the 70s, in my opinion. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
For the last 20 minutes of this podcast, we've been lying to you. There's an F for Fake reference.
Of course, He was. I just love watching those Japanese whiskey adverts Orson Welles in, where he's just.
There's a whole section in this book about that.
Oh, is there? Oh, brilliant!
Going, I've got to make money somehow to pay for this next movie that I'm making, so I'll just become this person where it's not really me, but I'll just be the,
He
have I
literally,
lost all my integrity?
they keep the versions of him almost passing out. He's that drunk in them. It's just great. He just can't really talk. Yeah, God, yeah. Have you seen the thing about how because he knew Churchill a little bit, didn't he? And he was trying to sort of get this Russian financier to pay for his next movie, his next Chimes at Midnight, or whatever it was going to be. And he walked into a restaurant, and Churchill was in there. And as he walked in, Churchill gave him a little sort of nod, like that. And he says, from that point, I knew I had the finance. And he saw Churchill afterwards and said, "Oh, thanks for that." He said, "Oh, no problem." He says, and then he walked in the restaurant the following night with the same financier, and Churchill stood up and did like this full bow, just like, "All right, yeah, nailed on now, good." Yeah, no, I'm a massive fan of his stuff. Yeah, good. Okay, so where can we find you, Eamonn? Where can we find you online, etc.? And what's your home address?
For Johnny Cannon, I live at megacitybookclub.com, britishreaders.com, and squeakyweeks.com. I'm off to eat both of those right now.
We deserve it, yeah. What about you, Al? Have you got any? Did you want to give your CAF address or anything like that out?
No.
No?
CAF is just dartfans.com and then search for Alan Henderson.
Cool.
You'll find Penguin by just searching Penguin on any form of, or many forms of social media for that. And if you want the hard sell as well, I'd say it's Alan-H1 on eBay.
Yes.
My current position.
I didn't realise about this. I should be going there this afternoon.
I don't think there's much there for you, but we'll never know.
Okay.
And then obviously we should make sure people visit largecow.com.
Yes.
Which is Hunt's website.
Hunt's site. Yes, very good. Well point. Well, good mate. Good point.
And you can go to the Comics Journal and find some of the interviews from that, or go and after this, go and have a listen to a lovely interview between Dan and Hunt, where Dan Berry's gone round Hunt's house, sat in his loft, and talked to him. And he's very forthcoming. Hunt. He's not one to hold back, and he's not one to. He just is funny. He's a lovely listen. I've got to tell you. Yeah, really good. You can find me on Tony Ez EZ over on Substack. Just put something out about the necessities of corporations, which is my new thing. But yeah, thanks a lot, guys. That was really good. Another one in the bag. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.